The Honourable Peter Foster.
Thank you, President. President, I want to start my valedictory today by acknowledging that we are on the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar Budja and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. It is with both sadness and pride that I rise today to give my valedictory speech. Sadness, as this amazing parliamentary term for me has come to an end. And with pride, to have been voted in and to represent the mining and pastoral region in the Legislative Council for the past 4 years and to represent their interests and share their stories in this place to the best of my ability. It has indeed been a great honour and a privilege to be elected to the Parliament and to represent all Western Australians. As I said to my son Roman recently when the Legislative Council count was completed, being a member of the Legislative Council has truly been my best job to date of my working life. Growing up in Kurri Kurri, attending the local senior high school, growing up gay, working part-time at the local fish and chip shop, I never once envisaged a career in politics. I only ever came to politics to stand up for my local community and to make a difference. As members may recall, during my inaugural speech, after I graduated from university, I began my career working in public service. I joined the public service to make a difference, to make life better for the community and to advocate for those who could not. Whilst working inside the police station in Tom Price, I always took the time to help my customers. Dealing with government departments can be challenging sometimes. If there was anything that I could do to take the stress out of the situation, I would. Not everyone who presented at my counter could read or write or understand how to complete a form. Not everyone who presented to me for their driving test was confident. I would always take my time, explain everything, answer everything, and be very clear on the expectations. I guess you could say that I was one of those public servants who would always go above and beyond what was expected just to get the work done. It is this same attitude that I have tried to bring to my work here in this chamber. As I said, I am proud of my time here, and I'll talk a bit about that more in a moment. I've had the immense privilege of being in public life for almost 14 years now, 9.5 years in local government and 4 years here in this chamber. Public life brings its challenges, judgment, scrutiny, and at times abuse. I'm completely okay with the judgment and scrutiny, but I'm not okay with the abuse. I've spoken about this before in the chamber. Humans could and should be kinder to one another. Bullies should be called out. I've also called out social media, Facebook, Snapchat and Twitter. Be better at moderating your content. Freedom of expression is the right to hold your own opinions and express them, but that should not extend to harassing or threatening others. I've certainly been called some interesting names on social media, and whenever I report those comments to the moderators, they simply allow it to continue. Criticise me for my views and votes expressed in this chamber, but don't bully, threaten or harass me in the process. Language matters, and I've spoken on this previously. We, as elected representatives, have a responsibility as leaders to set the tone for the debate. It doesn't help when members make contributions or even promote Facebook posts that seek to divide our community or encourage further hatred or harassment of members of our community. Those who encourage or incite hatred should be called out and condemned. I had the privilege late last year to give a keynote speech at the Pride and Diversity Executive Leaders Network at Murdoch University. It was humbling to be invited to speak about my political journey, about inclusion and diversity and why it matters. I spoke about some difficulties I faced in my youth, in particular bullying and mental health challenges with anxiety, and how I challenged myself to overcome that and put my name forward to represent my community, firstly on local council and then later for a seat in this chamber. Parliament should be reflective of society, and that means more representation from our culturally and linguistically diverse communities, from people with a disability, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander background, as well as those from the LGBTIQIA+ community. I am proud to have been an LGBTQIA+ regional representative here in this place. For many of us in the LGBTQIA+ community, it's our past trauma that holds us back. And in this, I completely understand. When society judges you, taunts you, and when laws facilitate discrimination, why would you want to get involved? I'm hopeful through my service in this chamber that I might inspire others in the LGBTQIA+ community to consider running for a seat in Parliament. As I said, parliaments must be representative of the communities that they serve. I'm proud to be part of a political party that pre-selects candidates from diverse backgrounds, and you can see that demonstrated on our side. I don't share the views of those opposite that those who enter this chamber from a union background are less qualified than those that don't. I am a proud union member, and I come from a family of proud union members. I believe in collective action to fight for better outcomes for all. Unity is strength. Unions absolutely have a place in modern Australian society in advocating for economic equality, safer workplaces and better working conditions. Isn't it our job in this place to advocate for a better Western Australia? As I said, I am both sad and proud to be leaving this place. President, what a journey it has been. The 31st Parliament was certainly kept busy, and as I was recently reminded, we passed over 140 pieces of legislation in this chamber. For me, there have been a few standouts. In April last year, we passed the Births, Deaths, Marriages Registration Amendment Bill 2024, which abolished the archaic Gender Reassignment Board and introduced a new process for a person born in Western Australia to apply to the Registrar of Births, Deaths and Marriages to change the sex or gender on their birth certificate. With the passing of this bill, the trans and gender diverse Western Australians are finally able to access an official document that matches their identity. In 2023, we passed the Liquor Control Amendment Bill to reduce alcohol-related harm by strengthening the Banned Drinkers Register, expanding pathways for being included on that register, and harsher penalties for selling or supplying liquor to those who are on that register. I know that this law will help improve community safety up in the northwest. In 2022, we passed the Whitnum Closure Bill, a bill that I contributed to in the second reading debate. We all know the story of Whitnum and the asbestos contamination and the health risks associated with that exposure. Even though the state government degazetted the town, removed services and voluntarily purchased several properties, there were still a few holdouts refusing to sell and leave, and the town was still being frequented by tourists. With the passage of that bill, it allowed for compulsory acquisition of those properties with compensation. The land was reinvested back to the state. All remaining buildings and infrastructure were demolished and buried, ultimately reducing the risk of asbestos contamination by discouraging residents and visitors to the former town. In 2021, we passed the Constitutional and Electoral Legislation Amendment Electoral Equality Bill, where we introduced the one vote, one value system. This bill abolished the 3 metropolitan and 3 regional regions in favour of the single electorate, the outcome of which being a fairer system for all Western Australians. While certainly not the longest bill we debated in this chamber, it was one of the only bills where we sat past midnight. And as one of the deputy chairs at the time, it was certainly challenging in the committee of the whole House stage, going through clause by clause in the early hours of the morning. It was an honour to be put forward as a deputy chair and acting president here in the Legislative Council, and I'm thankful that I did not have to deal with too many points of order during my time in the chair. I have enjoyed my time getting to learn the standing orders and the practices of this chamber. It was also a privilege to be the chair of the Environment and Public Affairs Committee in the 41st Parliament. I'd like to think that we were one of the hardest working committees, primarily dealing with all the petitions that were lodged here in the Council. I believe over the past 4 years the committee received 181 petitions, of which 156 were finalised. One of our reports, Broken Bonds, Fractured Lives, report on the inquiry into past forced adoption in Western Australia, which I tabled last year on the 22nd of August, is a report I'm particularly humbled to have been involved with. I want to acknowledge my other committee members, the Honourable Jorn Sibma, the Honourable Sophia Marmont, the Honourable Shelley Payne and the Honourable Stephen Pratt, who now sits in the other place. I also want to thank and acknowledge our committee staff, Carmen Cummings, Stephen Brockway, Karis Tyso and Kate Howley. It was a very big report and those 4 hard-working individuals helped us bring it all together. The inquiry was instigated following a petition that the committee received asking for an inquiry into past adoptive policies and practices, which the committee ultimately resolved to do so. Now, this inquiry took us almost 18 months, and this was in part due for a number of reasons, primarily to allow those who wish to make a submission to the inquiry the time to do so. We were asking the community to make submissions about a time in their life which was traumatic, disempowering, and for some, a time that they would rather not remember because the pain that they endured was simply too great. I want to again thank and acknowledge every single contributor to the inquiry for their courage and strength as they shared their personal experiences. We received over 6,000 pages of evidence from over 165 contributors, many of which were mothers or adopted people. We held several hearings, many in private, to allow those affected by forced adoption to tell their story to the committee in a safe and supported environment and in a trauma-informed way. We know from the evidence received many of the forced adoptions took place between 1939 and 1980, and that many of the mothers were coerced into giving up their children, at times forcibly, and misled or misinformed by both staff employed by the state and non-government institutions. We heard stories of how mothers were prevented from seeing, holding or feeding their babies, and adopted people were denied the right of being seen, held or fed by their mothers. We heard stories from mothers about how they were ridiculed and mistreated by hospital staff or forced to work at non-government institutions in return for their bed and lodgings, or worse, suffered some abuse by the matrons. We heard stories about how mothers were forced to sign consent forms. And we heard stories about how adopted newborns were left in institutions for weeks and months before they were taken into care. The damage caused by forced adoptive practices is irreparable. These practices also affected the fathers, extended family members, and even the children of those who were adopted. This inquiry enabled those affected to share their experiences, some of whom that were sharing their experiences for the very first time. I want to share one quote from the report, and it is as follows. I spent 70 days in a plastic tub awaiting the assignment of married parents deemed appropriate by the state of Western Australia. I was stolen from my mother at birth, stripped of my identity, assigned a number, and handed to strangers who gave me a fake identity and lied to me about my origins, end quote. The committee were often thanked for conducting the inquiry, and I think the 5 of us on the committee and the committee staff who assisted us felt privileged for their trust that they placed in us. On the day of the tabling of the report, it was quite an emotional day for me and memorable for having some of the survivors sit up in the gallery to listening to my tabling statement and to receive a printed hard copy of the report. I talked to a few of the survivors following the tabling. There were certainly hugs and tears and a sense of finally that they felt they were being listened to and that something might actually happen to address the harms done to mothers, fathers and adopted children and their families. The report contained a number of findings and recommendations, and the state government has already responded with the creation of the Western Australian Forced Adoption Reference Group, which will ensure people with lived experience of forced adoption have a central role in shaping legislation, policies and practices that impact on them. The third position which I've had the privilege to hold is that of Government Whip here in the Council, taking over from the Honourable Pierre Yang at the beginning of last year. I want to thank both the current leader, the Honourable Stephen Dawson, and the previous leader, the Honourable Sue Ellery, for their trust in me and the support of the State Parliamentary Labor Party caucus. President, what can I say about being the whip? Well, I can confidently report that during my time as Government Whip, we on this side never lost a division. Thank you, absolute majority. And that no Labor Party member ever missed a division, which is also appreciated. I'd also like to thank and acknowledge the Opposition Whip, the Honourable Colin de Grosser, for the positive working relationship that we've had working through pair arrangements. Whilst I will miss being the Whip, I certainly won't miss keeping eyes on you all and texting you to return to the chamber. Thanks to all my colleagues for your respect and support for me during my time as Whip, and of course I wish the incoming government Whip in the council all the very best. Other than my work in Parliament, another highlight of my parliamentary journey has been travelling around the vast mining and pastoral region, spending time in regional towns, meeting and getting to know so many stakeholders and community members. From Kalbarri to Kununurra and the many coastal and inland towns in between, I spent as much time as possible travelling and connecting, so much so that one of my constituents thought that I owned a TARDIS to get around. I love spending time at the Murchison settlement in the Midwest. The Shire of Murchison is famously known as the only local government in Western Australia without a gazetted town site. The Shire, known for its dark sky, is also home to the Square Kilometre Array, which I've also had the privilege to visit on a number of occasions. It was truly special to spend time in Derby and attend the Maljam Festival, learn the stories, culture and experiences of those who were removed from their homelands to Nikana country far from their sacred Wodgina caves. Such beautiful artwork can be found there at the Cultural Centre. I've also spent a bit of time in Mount Magnet. I had the honour of speaking and opening the Astro Rocks Festival, which is held annually in Mount Magnet. This festival showcases its dark sky for astronomers and also showcases its unique geological formations, flora and fauna, as well as sharing stories of the traditional owners, the Badamaya people. I've also attended several Pride festivals across regional WA, including those held in Broome, Carnarvon and in Port Hedland. And I want to particularly acknowledge the Pilbara Pride Festival, which is coming up in a few months' time. I know that Gloria, Nikki and the team are pulling together a fantastic program this year. As I've said in this chamber before, Pride festivals are not only important to promote the diversity, equality and visibility of LGBTQIA+ people, but also reflect upon and highlight the years of struggle of ongoing pursuit for equality under the law. I've also spent a bit of time in Onslow, and it was there recently, this weekend in fact, that I attended the Onslow's 100-year celebration with the Leader of the House and the Member for Pilbara. As a former councillor with the Shire of Ashburton, it made the event even more special as we celebrated Onslow's 100 years. It has been a century since Onslow relocated from the Old Town site to its current location. And how could I not mention the total solar eclipse event, which I represented the government at in Onslow in April 2023, with my son Roman. I shall never forget seeing hundreds of locals and residents and visitors with their cardboard eclipse glasses staring up at the sky and watching that magic moment where the sun and the moon intersected. One last town I would like to mention is Wiluna, having the privilege to visit that town a number of times. I visited the school, met with the Shire, but the most unique visit was when I had the privilege to open the Wiluna Youth Precinct, which features my name on the celebratory plaque in recognition of my support for the project. I could go on, but suffice it to say I've used my term to get around my electorate as much as possible. There are so many success stories right across regional WA, and I hope that we continue to focus on the good and not the bad as we so often do. I'm extremely proud and humbled by the many working relationships that I've developed over this parliamentary journey, and I look forward to continuing them post-Parliament. I know that it is often said in this place that Labor does not care about the regions, but I can guarantee you that's not the case. And I and my colleagues have worked every day to get around the region and worked very hard for every community. Through my office, we've helped many constituents with various issues, and we've handed out quite a few flags to local schools and groups. I've got a bit of a reputation, particularly in Tom Price, for finding answers and solutions to local issues, and it is certainly this part of my role that I will miss. One of the tasks which I really enjoyed is sending out birthday cards to constituents for significant birthdays. And it was always nice when you would get a phone call or a thank you letter in the post acknowledging their card. It is here that I will begin my acknowledgements. I need to start by thanking firstly my two hard-working electorate office staff, Jacqueline Michelle, who I believe is watching from the electorate office in Karratha, and Paul Benson, who's here in the gallery. Thank you both for being part of Team Foster, for answering the emails, the phone calls, for keeping me on task when at times there's been many distractions both here in the chamber and out in the electorate. I wish you both the best for whatever you do next and appreciate your support and encouragement during your time in the office. I want to thank WA Labor, first for their endorsement to run for the Legislative Council, and secondly to State Secretary Ellie Whittaker and her hardworking team for their amazing state campaigns in 2021 and again in 2025. As someone who has directed and been involved with a number of campaigns, it is through the strength of our members that we owe many of our successes. They volunteer at polling places, knock on doors, they letterbox, make phone calls, they help us with fundraising and so much more. Big thank you to the Broome, South Hedland, Newman, Karratha and Carnarvon Labor branches for their support. And I would like to single out some special members from those branches. Robert Seymour, Camille Williams, Malcolm DeLille, Robert Ashcroft and Tracy Tonga in Carnarvon. Stephen Goodlett, Peter Bayer and David Coular in Newman. In Karratha, Tammy Stubbs and Rodney Slapp. In Port Hedland, Tricia Hubbard, Kelly Howlett, Peter Pope, Kate Wilson, Gary Ansell, Sharon Morrow and Barry Harrison. And from the mighty Broome branch, Mika Polina, Sue Donnelly, Lynette Pope, Georgia Carter, Val Lindbergh and Nick Linton. I would also like to acknowledge and thank the Australian Manufacturer Workers Union for their backing and their support. Thank you to State Secretary Steve McCartney, Assistant State Secretary Glenn McLaren, Campaigns Organiser Darcy Gunny, and two of my favourite union organisers, Renee Portland and Jade Rowlands, for their support and help in some of our campaigns. I firmly believe in a future that is made here in Western Australia. I also want to thank some amazing people who have helped out on recent campaigns. These people are not party members, but supporters of both Labor and me. In Exmouth, I want to particularly thank Corinna Belsard, Glenn Davis, Kimmy Thornburn and Cheryl Mulross for their support and their friendship. Shout out also to Bruce Strawn at the Trustcott Memorial Club in Exmouth, and a big thank you to Jackie Brooks from the Ningaloo Lodge for always looking out for me, and I value our friendship. In Paraburdoo, I want to thank and acknowledge my friend Alana Sullivan. In Tom Price, well, where do I start? I believe my dear friend Marion Hearn, who we all affectionately call Maz, is watching online right now, and I want to thank her for her endless support and encouragement and a listening ear whenever I felt the need to vent. Maz saw something in me when she convinced me to join the Tom Price Youth Support Association Management Committee back in 2010, and I do believe through my role with the TPYSA that it has helped me find the confidence to pursue this journey into state politics. I believe online also with Maz is Jennifer Isakoff, and I want to thank her as well for her support, as well as for keeping me well informed over the years. I really do owe my start in politics to my life in Tom Price, from volunteering to running for council to running for a seat in this chamber. Tom Price will always be a special place for me, and I cannot wait for the day when the Maniwarra Red Dog Highway is completed and the Tom Price and Paraburdoo hospitals are redeveloped. I know that the Cook Labor government is working very hard to deliver all these projects. To my dear friends in Tom Price who have handed out at the 2021 and 2025 state elections and been some of my biggest supporters, Kira Hannon, Vanola Nichols, Deb Walker, Najani Williams and Audra Smith. From moral support to letterboxing to standing in the sun for me, thank you. I want to also acknowledge and thank our clerk, Sam Hastings, our Deputy Clerk Paul Grant, and their hard-working team, both here in the chamber and over in the committee office, for everything that they do to support us in the chamber. You always go above and beyond for us. Thank you also to Rob Hunter and the Parliamentary Services team, from the amazing catering team, Hansard, library staff, cleaners, gardeners, security and protective services. You are all valued and appreciated. I would like to thank you, Honourable Stephen Dawson, for your friendship and mentorship. I've certainly come a long way from that first street stall we did back in Tom Price in 2013 to be sitting next to each other here in this chamber. I would also like to thank you, President, for your support and guidance. And I would also like to acknowledge and thank my comrade, the Honourable Dr Sally Talbot, for her wise counsel over the years. I would also like to acknowledge and thank the member for Kimberley, who is here in the chamber, the member for Pilbara and the member for Kalgoorlie for your support. I am so proud that you were all re-elected in March. To the colleagues on this side of the House and the other, thank you for your support, and I do wish you all the best. I want to acknowledge and thank my mother-in-law, Kathy Samaras, and father-in-law, Tom Samaras. With my partner Sam and I often working long hours and fly in, fly out, they spent almost 18 months living at our house, helping us at home with Roman and keeping our house in order. Temporarily relocating from New South Wales to WA wasn't easy, and I'm forever grateful for their support, which enabled me to give my all to this role. To my mum Joanne and dad Neville, who also may be watching online, thank you for everything. As I reflected upon in my inaugural speech, I have you both to thank for my pursuits of equality and fairness and to help those in need. Thank you for your unwavering support on this journey. I have no doubt it was your values that inspired me to join the Labor Party. To my son Roman, who is here in the chamber today. You make your dad and I so proud every single day. You are smart, funny, and I love that you are inquisitive and creative. Please know that we both believe in you. When you were born back in 2014, I'd already been on council for a few years. Having your papa in public life is all you've ever known. As what you said to me when you were younger, papa's job is always to attend meetings. I look forward to being home more often with you, supporting you more with your schoolwork, especially with you being off to high school next year. Lastly, my partner Sam. You are my rock and my cheerleader, and at the recent state election, you said to me, regardless of the final outcome, you were so very proud of me. Thank you for tolerating my many work trips and nights away, and for the many chores that you had to do for me to accommodate my busy work schedule, and for just being there when I needed to vent after a particularly stressful day. Whilst my time in the Legislative Council is coming to an end, and I know that there is much more work to be done, and I wish my colleagues who are continuing and those colleagues who are joining them all the very best. As a member of this place who became a parent through surrogacy, I am particularly hopeful of legislation coming to this place to modernise our current surrogacy laws. Through my connections with Surrogacy Australia, Rainbow Families and Gay Dads WA, I have met so many who have pursued surrogacy arrangements overseas to start their families, some of whom have bravely shared their stories publicly. I look forward to the day where all Western Australians can access surrogacy and reciprocal IVF without discrimination. I also am looking forward to seeing a new Equal Opportunity Act and the banning of conversion practices with both a criminal prohibition and civil response scheme, protecting vulnerable Western Australians. Politics can be tribal and brutal, but with that said, I've made some amazing connections and friendships from my time in this place. Whilst we may have differing views on many issues, there is more that unites us in this chamber than divides us. Do not be afraid to work across the chamber to get things done. Please look for the good in each other. It is easy to get into the mud of politics, but we should never lose focus of the end goal, to faithfully serve the people of Western Australia. As I said at the beginning, I am both sad and proud to be giving my valedictory today, and it has been a great honour to serve in this place. So long, and thanks for all the fish. Good job.